And hello everyone, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you as always. And on the show tonight we have Israel and Palestine. We take a look at the latest on the war on Gaza, with, of course, taking a close look at the conditions happening inside the Strip for the Palestinians, with intense famine, getting people just as much as the daily horrific massacres. Over this past weekend, we've seen already pictures of people, lying down in, various buildings and various streets, just splayed out dead across various buildings in various streets as well, and also in various states of near dying, just awful scenes. The vast majority of Gazans struggling to come by one full meal, or let alone any meal a day at this point. A horrific video emerging of a Gazan woman holding a child getting shot while waving a white flag. Also, we'll take a look at how Israel says they're, quote-unquote, scaling down their North Gazan operations, and we will take a look at what it means. They did not claim to have destroyed any Hamas forces, but rather they say they have eliminated their senior commanders. Meanwhile, we take a look at the hundreds missing from Gaza's Aqsa hospital amid the Israeli bombardment, and some more general updates, as well as a fascinating look at Barack Obama's opinion on Joe Biden's 2024 campaign. Hint, he does not think it's going well. Yeah, leave it to, of course, Obama's that, annoying older brother, I think, for Biden, despite obviously Biden being a lot older than Obama. He has had Obama, his political success. He's done with his political career now, where Biden just had to, just slave away all his life to get to this presidency position, and very well could be a, one-term president going down in failure. So there is going to be a little bit of kind of a, annoying quality to, Joe Biden, Obama coming in and swooping in and arrogantly giving advice to the Biden campaign, as it has been for, 12 plus years at this point, of, Obama kind of arrogantly giving advice to Biden. There's another feature in that today. So anyway, we start with our major stories coming out of, Israel and Palestine, obviously, where as the Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has told the Wall Street Journal that it can copy and paste the devastation in Gaza into Beirut. At least 73. Really affirming some of these United States fears about a broader two-front war into Lebanon as well. Yoav Gallant seeming to be really foaming at the mouth for that, and has been for some weeks now. This coming as Antony Blinken has been, and senior defense staff, at least the ones that are not in a coma in the hospital doing God knows what. Just a little side note there, because we won't fully get into it. Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, has been in the hospital for the past 4 days, didn't tell anyone, not even his number two in the Pentagon, because of some illness. But they are, on the U.S. side, apparently genuinely freaked out about the idea of Israel launching a war with Hezbollah, because they kind of know they'll have to come in and defend them in some way, and they know as well it's going to be a big fat mistake for Israel to come in there, and they're going to really, face a heavy price. They already haven't been too successful against Hamas. Definitely not as successful as they would have liked. So it's, just imagine taking in Hezbollah, which is far more of a threat than Hamas ever was. So this comes, though, as 73 have been killed in the past 24 hours. The death toll nears 23,000. At least this is the kind of very conservative death toll. I think it's important to take into account. Blinken is warning, along with many other sources, that the Israel-Hamas war could metastasize, and especially, in the way that he's really concerned about is a way that's out of Israel, and therefore the United States' control. And it could be really Israel who gives themselves that blow, or kind of makes that mistake. This comes as there is video increasingly circulating that we saw some dead bodies, littered in this area where people had clearly been sheltering, littered throughout the streets, on various streets connecting the north and the south, just as they had been, trying to flee. people have clearly been shot and left to die, left to rot. And of course, we've seen many, many stories of people trying to help their fallen friends, loved ones, or even just perfect strangers. They just, don't want to let sit there and die in the street. And of course, the Israeli snipers will shoot at them as well. So that is just a little bit of perspective of, what's going on. And one really remarkable, horrific scene where there was this is a Gazan woman. This is actually from the 12th of November. So this was in the heat of, cast your mind, this is almost 2 months ago now, where casting your mind back, this is right when the ground invasion was getting underway. People were really getting pushed to leave their homes in Gaza City as, Israel came in with the clear intention of destroying the whole place, regardless of any ties to Hamas. They came in, started blowing everything up, residential block after residential block after residential block. And obviously people began to flee. And there's this really remarkable video, absolutely horrific video, to be perfectly clear. And obviously, most videos coming out of the Gaza Strip are pretty horrific. But there is this video of this group of people coming down, a woman kind of leading the way, holding a child, holding hands with the child, clearly the mother of the child. And so they're walking down the street, fleeing the Gaza Strip in the beginning of this ground invasion. Keep in mind, so much of the city had already been bombed, but this is the beginning of Israeli troops coming in. So they say, let's get out. They're kind of going with a big kind of procession down these bombarded streets. And then all of a sudden, you just hear this really, horrific shot ring out. This is two people. The mother falls down to the ground as the shot rings out, and the boy runs off. And a man later goes to help her, but then, obviously the rest of them flee. There's horrific screaming. That man who's filming it from an apartment above says the woman got shot. And then he says that again. And then he says, the bastard shot the woman. This is a woman holding her child, waving a white flag. This is before Thanksgiving. This is months and months ago. Or really 2 months ago, but it is really just a sickening thing. And this is something that, that bullet, that, every single bomb we have as a country, we have on our hands because we were the people that sent it over and enabled this whole thing to take place. And speaking of that, Biden is really feeling it. So this is a speech at Charleston, South Carolina's AME Church. This is with the, I believe the one that was shot up a few years ago during the Obama administration by the right-wing domestic terrorist Dylan Roof, and he was flanked by, as Adolph Reed would call them, the stars of the Black misleadership class. One of them being the shall we say famous Jim Clyburn in making a speech about who knows what, but then it was interrupted. Let's take a listen.
If you really care about the lives lost here, you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
So then they're getting escorted out, and that's the chant that comes up. If on cue, then everybody arises, and
Thank you. Look, folks, I understand their passion, and I've been quietly working with the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza, using all that I can to do that.
And we'll get to the reality of that in a moment. So again, it's just a complete lie, and it's been a really, really, really horrific situation to watch. And of course, there's been people trying to say, "Oh, these whitey pro-Palestinian protesters disrupt one of the most famous black churches in the country." And of course, there were clearly on video, I think multiple black people. I'm not trying to, get the calipers out and tell if someone's, do you consider yourself mixed race? Do you consider yourself black? But there was clearly at least, a black woman there on that MSNBC video, but who was, saying for a ceasefire now along with that. But just like, what a pathetic stance. I don't know who those people are. I don't know if they're Democratic Party donors, if they're like kind of just like a friendly crowd. The way they do it sometimes with debates is they just put, donors and prominent figures. There's a big speech at a well-known place. Jim Clyburn there was standing right next to him as it zoomed out. He did not look too happy. Was standing right next to, they're sitting next to the reverends, and there's just Jim Clyburn there on the dais right next to Biden. But like, this is just a really, kind of tone deaf situation. Just the massive amounts of Democratic base. Joe Biden saying something that is just patently ridiculous throughout. You can just check any sort of, just reading the news, any experience of just what's going on. It's almost a Trumpian level of delusion, just saying, don't believe your lying eyes. I've been working quietly. I've been doing this. I'm doing this. We have seen absolutely nothing to show for it. You go to, a black church, there's a mixed race group of people that come in, interrupts. It's not like he was going to say, and I think it's interesting that he did kind of take time to address them and, speak to their concerns, which he wouldn't have done for everybody. But, it really represents just an epic failure of the Democratic Party, and specifically the Biden administration. As we will take a look here, they're going to, later on in the show, they are losing tons and tons of support from, specifically on this issue. You see the big differences of support between, the whiter parts of the Democratic base and the younger parts of the Democratic base, the older parts of the Democratic base. If you're older and you're whiter, you're more likely to be pro-Israel. And, there's a bunch of people in there, there's probably a bunch of, white people you could see there in that audience. But if you want to speak to, go to a black church, the idea is you're speaking to, the black base of the Democratic Party, not necessarily maybe, some of the younger people, but it is kind of a myth. Biden did win South Carolina in the primaries on mostly kind of older white suburban support, not necessarily massive surges of black support. But he is not speaking to people who in the Democratic Party are some of the most Palestinian supporting people, which are, black, Latino, just anyone who's, again, non-white and tends to be younger, are people who Biden absolutely needs to win the election. That's how he won the election the last time. It was only 40,000 votes across, 3 states that would have kept Trump, or would have brought Trump back in the White House. They need every bit of support they can get. And this is just an incredibly tone-deaf, delusional way to go about assuaging these concerns, and the outrage, the hand-wringing about, some people online talking about, some of the Democratic Party reporters being like, oh, this is, a black church. It was very bad. They were doing this at a black church. It's just disrespectful, And again, it's just like doing that, and then, so people just going out to stop the things like we just talked about, that woman getting shot in the street, things like that happening on a day-to-day basis, hospitals getting destroyed, people getting taken out of and abducted from hospitals. It is, to just people trying to stop that, any way they can, and then you just chant, 4 more years of the exact same. It's just an incredibly tone-deaf, disgusting, repellent, situation that makes me, feel just that much more confident about my decision to, vote for Cornel West or Jill Stein come 2024. This is really just a pathetic, continuously pathetic display. Let's go to, quickly some other updates now. On Monday, Jordan Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi expressed that it is intolerable for the international community to permit the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to lead the Middle East towards a broader regional war. State media reported that Safadi, in a phone conversation with his French counterpart Catherine Colonna, emphasized that the increasing daily risk of war expansion due to Israel's ongoing infliction of death and destruction in Gaza was getting higher. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have shot 3 Palestinians dead in Tulkarm, which is a city in the West Bank, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry there that they announced on Monday. No more details on those who were killed were provided. In the 18 months leading up to the 7th of October, the West Bank had already seen its highest levels of unrest in years, Reuters reported, but there had been at least 150. That number is definitely inaccurate, but at least 150 on the lower side. It's inaccurate, but there have been at least 150 deaths by settlers at the hands of settlers or at the hands of Israeli forces, just murders of Palestinian people of all ages in the West Bank. Protests continue as hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters on Monday blocked the entrances to 3 major bridges and a tunnel in New York City to demand a ceasefire in the war on Gaza. Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Williamsburg bridges were shut down for a few hours on Monday morning, along with the Holland Tunnel as all major entrance points to get into lower Manhattan, which is obviously a pretty business hub. Activists chanted no business as usual there, so it's kind of continuing tactic there, which was pretty good, and kind of continuing to raise awareness. Although it would be good to see one of those kind of mass marches to show the sheer numbers of people, but it just, again, so hard when you see absolutely no resistance from the government to break or crack in any serious way. Just they have the complete blinders on when it comes to the amount of public support that they're losing on this, in my opinion. But meanwhile, the Israeli captives continue to go through hell in Gaza as well. The Islamic Jihad group has released a video of an Israeli captive being held in Gaza on Monday. The captive is believed to have been taken from Nir al-Oz on 7th of October, according to Haaretz. His mother was also taken captive, but then later released because when you do ceasefire, when you do diplomacy, that's how, the best way for hostages to come home. The Israelis have brought home, as we very clearly know, -3 hostages through military action. So they're not really good at it. When they try to bring home hostages, they end up killing them just like they kill everybody else. So this is what the hostages had to say. He addresses Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says, "You have left me in captivity. You have left me to face death." And you say, "Oh, this is Palestinian Islamic Jihad telling him to say that." But if I were him, I'd be like, I kind of feel the same way. It's just, I was watching other people get out through ceasefires, not seeing, in any way the Israeli army having the ability to come in and rescue me, just killing some of the other people that, I was held hostages with. It would really piss me off and say, "Hey, Netanyahu, you obviously can't do this. I want to get out of here. Please, can you just end this war and start negotiations?" So anyway, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed efforts to prevent the war on Gaza from spreading in a meeting with the EU High Representative Joseph Borrell in Saudi Arabia on Monday, but again, didn't seem to be absolutely too productive there at the at the major front of it. Meanwhile, there is a Palestinian lawmaker named Ahmad Tibi accused the Israeli government on Monday of legitimizing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, according to Israeli media. Several countries across Europe, Africa, Asia, and Latin America have signed up to a global day of action that will see marches take place on Saturday, demanding Israel end its bloody war. UK-based advocacy groups organizing say the initiative say the marches will take place on the 13th of January, the 99th day of Israel's offensive on Gaza, seeking to mobilize people to demand a permanent ceasefire and end the Israeli attacks on the embattled territory. So we have marches in the US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Switzerland, Denmark, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, Australia, Brazil, Jordan, Turkey, and several others. So I know I will be at the UK one as we try to set up our Hell Island show. Maybe do a little bit of a special from there, but I don't know. But it'll be very, very exciting. So I would definitely be out there. Hopefully, you should try and find a one, wherever you may be listening to this, that you can participate in as well. I think our biggest 3 countries are the U.S., UK, and New Zealand. So you all got something to do. So get out there. Meanwhile, there's some interesting reports of Israel saying they're scaling down their operations in northern Gaza after it dismantled Hamas in the area, apparently, according to Israeli military spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. The army has completed the dismantling of Hamas's military framework in northern Gaza City. Israel released a list of the names of the Hamas commanders killed to suggest the two northernmost of the Qassam brigades, a total of 12 battalions, were rendered headless and out of battle. Which, again, knowing very little, honestly, about the kind of internal structure of Hamas, I do know that they are, people who tend to, regenerate quickly and are relatively not about, we have to have these, commanders, and we have a very kind of officer-heavy structure, unlike some armies I tend to, hear about sometimes. But just straight up killing officers may not be the most, effective way. It's not like something you're going to be, beheading people. This event, this October 7th, this, genocide in progress here has created so many more people, clearly that on both sides that have moved toward violence. So it's something that you're going to see, growing more and more. So it's not, definitely does not mean, there was rockets launched, earlier today, at least in UK time. It was earlier, kind of this evening. Rockets were launched from northern Gaza into Israeli sites and kind of villages. So that is something you do when you tend to have pretty strong operational capabilities, military capabilities, a little bit more at least than are being let on by some of the folks in the Israeli leadership. But a careful reading of Israeli claims and analysis of both sides' performance suggests the situation is not as simple as a Israeli victory / Hamas defeat. A more precise description would be an Israeli acknowledgement of Hamas disengagement in one theater. There is little doubt Hamas suffered heavy losses while facing a determined and prolonged Israeli offensive using far superior technology and numbers. It is also very likely that a significant number of commanders and deputies have been killed. Israel uses all means to decapitate Qassam Brigade's units by targeting their commanders, often using precision rockets fired from helicopters and drones, but Hamas has known this for a very long time, and its units operates on the principle that each commander always has at least one deputy trained and briefed to the same level. When one falls in battle, the chain of succession moves a step up, and units are rarely headless for more than a couple of hours. There is also a fundamental difference in the way the Israeli army and Qassam brigades operate on the battlefield. This is from Al Jazeera analysis here from Zoran Kusevac. So it's important here, to say Israel has a well-equipped military organized very classically, where each unit or a battle group has precisely allocated tasks, means at their disposal, and areas of responsibility. It can use those forces very flexibly, with each unit's commander highly independent, so that they can exploit military opportunities when they arise without waiting for approval from headquarters. Yet, even though they are flexible, Israeli units still operate under the rules of hierarchical army, where ranks and positions determine the commander's thinking. Hamas armed units follow a different fundamental principle. As a non-state force, the Qassam Brigade's prime consideration is secrecy, protection of the chain of command, and maximum separation of units in the field. While not guerrillas in the full meaning of the term, Hamas forces aim for structured designed to ensure the survival of the combat capabilities of other units when one is compromised or lost. So we saw with the October 7th, there was an incredible amount of separation in terms of which parts of Hamas knew what, when, and there was all kind of a plan very much on a need-to-know basis for this reason exactly. Hamas battalions apparently operate, again, with the only basic coordination with their brigade commands. If higher command is lost, as many have happened with the northern brigades, where their commanders and deputies were killed within a short time span, battalions can operate under the last set of coordinated orders. Having practically independent battalions might be quite inadequate for offensive actions that require precise coordination, but for defense, which is almost exclusively what Hamas has been doing since the beginning of the Israeli land offensive on October 27th, is usually more than adequate. The Institute for the Study of War lists both the Northern Brigade and the Gaza Brigade of Hamas as degraded, which is a step below combat effective, but far from destroyed. Out of the two brigades, 12 battalions, ISW list 8 as degraded and 3 as combat ineffective, denoting units that are practically broken down, just 1 as combat effective, which is practically untouched. So objective readings of the assessment suggest that Hamas has been seriously weakened, but remains capable of putting a fight seriously, especially in defense. And I think, this capacity for regeneration, this capacity for, refueling and the willingness that I think, very few people in the West like truly understand. I can't say that I understand it. It's just like this willingness to, die, fight and die to defend your homeland, to, again, it's just that theory of that, kind of often heard work cliche is, oh yeah, we actually live here. So they are going to fight like it. So another really disturbing story to get to. Hundreds of patients and staff are reported to be missing from Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza, which is struggling to cope with the intense airstrikes on the enclave. Apparently, I'm not sure if exactly that it was at Aqsa, but there was another maternity ward that was targeted, direct hit. But I don't think there was anyone in there, but, really just shows you what their, priorities are. The majority of the medical staff, as well as 600 patients, have been forced to leave the complex to unknown locations with no information of their whereabouts. So again, this is people that are essentially rounded up. I think, and it's important to say, there are people still in here. It's not like they, clear. I think we kind of forgot about the hospitals after that Al-Akhli, that actually the Al-Aqsa hospital was the one where they had, supported terrorist tunnels. But there are still people that have been in there trying to, coalesce, trying to meet up with their families, find out if the families are still alive, even charge their phones, get a drink of water, all the really basic necessities of life, as we've talked about in the show. Hospitals have come to really mean those for pretty much everyone in Gaza. So there's still a lot of people there, a lot of medical professionals who are there. 600 patients that as well have been forced to leave the complex to unknown locations, and nobody really knows where they are, according to the WHO and the UN. The two institutions note chaotic scenes as the remaining staff in the hospital continue to try to cope with an influx of injured people as heavy Israeli bombardment from air, land, and sea intensified across much of the Gaza Strip. Staff from the WHO and the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, visited the only functioning hospital in the government of Deir el-Balah in central Gaza on Sunday. They noted that intense bombing has driven many to seek medical help at Al-Aqsa. The Ministry of Health in Gaza reports that 225 Palestinians were killed and 296 people injured from Israeli attacks between the 5th and 7th alone of January. The officials said that the large number of wounded were being treated by very few staff at the facility because, again, they just essentially kicked or, maybe kidnapped is the better word, a majority of the staff of that incredibly important hospital out. So, no one really does know what they are. An incredibly chaotic scene. The hospital is operating, again, with no materials and has not had materials for a long time. They're operating with about 30% of the staff that it had just a few days ago. They're seeing, in some cases, hundreds of casualties every day in a very small emergency department, according to WHO official Sean Casey. Medical aid for Palestinians in the International Rescue Committee said the emergency medical team had been forced to cease activities at the hospital and leave the facility as a result of increasing Israeli military activity. So apparently, sickening scenes, according to the WHO Director General, of people being treated on blood-streaked floors, and it's just chaotic corridors. If you've been on Instagram or social media for a second, you have definitely seen it before. Again, it's just an absolutely unimaginable situation. As Israel continues its medical and everything else, complete and total siege and blockade of the Gaza Strip. All right, some more kind of flash updates for you. We mentioned a shooting a little bit ago in Tulkarem. This is the West Bank. This is from Hamdam Salhut, who is a Al Jazeera reporter in occupied East Jerusalem. So the video of the incident, she says, is quite graphic. 3 Palestinian men shot at an incredibly close range by the Israeli military, their bodies bleeding out in the street. After that, Israeli military vehicle runs one of the bodies over, and you can see the car stop for a minute and then continue to run over this dead Palestinian man in the street. This is, again, completely on video, out there, recorded for the world to see, but the world, just doesn't see it. It's absolutely shocking. It is incredible. It's like, if you, in some places in America, it's like, I don't know, if people listening to this, they've heard or seen some of the images and maybe tried to show them to a loved one, and they're just like, ugh, I don't want to see that. It's just like, like, how can you just live with just on a normal day, like, knowing that this stuff is happening? Just cartoon level. If they tried to write it into a cartoon, they'd be like, it's too on the nose. Like, this is too graphic. This is too dramatic. This like would never even happen in real life. It's just like, and here it is happening in real life, and nobody is doing anything about it. It is absolutely horrific stuff. So the raid apparently started off as Israeli special forces went into Tulkarem undercover with the hopes of arresting one wanted Palestinian fighter. We have learned since that he has also been shot, but has since been arrested by the Israeli military. So they got their guy, and they just had to, kill. It's like when you go out for, some chips, and you also are like, okay, I want to go get a drink, as I just did, a few hours ago before recording this podcast. But instead, I'm just going to, take out one Palestinian who, if he's a fighter or not, who even knows. There's no trial. There's no Jewish. It's like, if you're even in any way suspected, you're hunted down, you're killed, just completely extrajudicially, because, the judiciary does not apply for, especially Palestinians in the West Bank, let alone Palestinians in Israel proper. But they just had to take out, 3 more Palestinians and run one of the guys' bodies over on video as well. It's just complete degrading of not only just the Palestinians' lives, Palestinians respecting their, dignity while they're on this earth, but when they depart, oftentimes, almost 100% of the time by Israeli hands, their bodies are desecrated. They're, every single, rule or law of war, whatever, about just respecting the dead, at the very least, is completely degraded and completely disrespected as part of the broader dehumanization of the Palestinians as a people that has gone in Israel since October 7th. Really horrific stuff. Meanwhile, the Lebanese group Hezbollah said the videos that they recently released of a recent attack show Israeli forces attacks against Israeli forces in the Metula area on the eastern side of their border over the past few days. Those are some of the kind of major updates as we really do have to keep a close eye on that, broader war, the potential opening of the second front, which Israel has been braying for, just mad animals over the past few days. So it is, or really over the past few weeks. Let's be 100% clear. All right. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our next story. It's a little bit of a just general here U.S. political story, taking our minds or our eyes off of Gaza for just a brief second to end the show. So this is from former President Barack Obama. He's apparently been raising questions and concerns about the structure of President Biden's re-election campaign, discussing the matter directly with Biden and telling the president's aides and allies the campaign needs to be empowered to make decisions without clearing them with the White House, according to 3 people familiar with the conversations. Because Biden, somehow is because there's two very interesting and kind of coexisting dynamics going on. Because on one side, you got Biden, who is objectively in a bad situation. He has, completely mismanaged the Israel situation, his economy, and the social safety net after the, pandemic was completely destroyed. There was no positive case that really, just basic voter communication that the Biden administration ever made with people to communicate why they should be happy in any way that was, convincing. The student debt catastrophe, all these things, he's in a really bad position, especially with some of his most committed voters. With the war in Gaza being kind of really the straw that broke the camel's back with a base. And he is obviously up for re-election, and he is having a real problem. He's down horrifically in the polls at this point. I mean, that obviously, it could change. It's very possible. But he is, really in a tough situation at this point. But he's also, incredibly old, incredibly crotchety, incredibly quick to anger, and always has been, a micromanager who is very set in the way he likes to do things, and he only trusts a very small circle of people, and also incredibly old circle of people that have been with him for a long time, to exact his will and to delegate responsibility both in his campaign and both in his day-to-day administration. So that dynamic is kind of on top of Obama coming in, and this is the kind of building off of a years-long dynamic that they've had between them, where Obama kind of condescends to Biden about how to do politics and how to, just generally, run campaigns and things like that, which Obama and his team, or Biden and his team hates. They just think, Obama's team is just a bunch of arrogant, kind of smarty pantses who think they're too cool for school and things like that. So Obama apparently grew animated during the discussing the 2024 election and former President Donald Trump's potential return to power. One of the people suggested and said that Biden said to Biden's advisors the campaign needs more top-level decision makers at its headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, or it must empower the people already in place. Obama has not recommended specific individuals, but he mentioned David Plouffe, who managed the 2008 race, Obama's 2008 race, as the type of senior strategist that needed at the Biden campaign. So yeah, just get the guy I got. This is probably the best for you, but okay, just this is like you see the level of kind of even when he's trying to be helpful and even when he's trying to raise alarm to a real question, he just comes off in a way that Biden absolutely hates, even though he is absolutely right, because Biden is someone who is again incredibly old, incredibly crotchety, incredibly insular as well, and someone who has been condescended to by Obama in the past. Obama's conversation with Biden on the subject took place during a private lunch at the White House in recent months. One of the people said, a meeting that has previously not been reported. Biden, who has long used Obama as a sounding board, invited his former boss to lunch, and the two discussed a range of topics, including the 2024 election. During the lunch, Obama noted the success of his re-election campaign in 2012 when some of his top presidential aides left the White House to take charge of his re-election in Chicago. Obama recommended that Biden seek counsel from Obama's former aides, which Biden officials say they have done, the people said. So Obama has apparently even been more explicit with the people close to Biden, suggesting the campaign needs to move aggressively as Trump appears poised to quickly wrap up the Republican nomination. His concerns about the campaign structure were not tied to a specific moment, but rather his belief that the campaign needs to be agile in competitive races. People said, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss the, confidential conversations. Spokespeople for Obama in the White House declined to comment. But yeah, so it's just like, just generally kind of Obama, somebody who has always, especially the presidential level, been a very, very astute politician, knows what's going on, know what people want to hear from him, and he is very able to deliver it because a smart politician is also an incredibly charismatic politician. Biden has never been, either of those things. He's been, a little bit charismatic from time to time, never been particularly astute, never been, able to tap into a broad, intentionally find something to tap into and tap into it. Just really getting, in 2020, lucky off the circumstances of the moment. And honestly, you could say the same thing in 2022, which is probably what they're going to try. They say here, their big plan for 2020 is, 2024 is January 6th, or Dobbs, is the way they're calling it, Dobbs and democracy. This is Kamala Harris's husband is saying that's the plan, which could work. It's obviously a very good, probably the best they got if they're not going to really go in a way that is fundamentally opposing or just in any way aggressive, which Democrats are fundamentally incapable of doing. That's really the only two strengths that they have to highlight. They can't we're not going to point out in the ways the Republicans kind of failed and to block continue to block some of their priorities and attack the far right in ways beyond that or besides of course just saying Trump's bad and tapping into that, but it is very much a situation that should not really be giving anyone too much encouragement. Apparently, Alyssa Slotkin, who is running in Michigan, was going to be a very tight race in all likelihood against, I think it's whoever the Republican is going to be there. I think it's like Bernie Moreno, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, it's just going to be a very, very tough situation, and Biden continues to, plug his ears and go, la, 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 skipping through the wind. We'll see how long that goes as 2024 election year gets underway. All right, that's all we got. We're back on Wednesday. It's Newsflash.